The greatest desert empires were built on a secret ocean. They thrived in places where water seems like a distant memory because of an ancient technology hidden beneath the sand. This is the story of the subterranean water networks that turned barren lands into gardens of plenty. By the end of this journey, you will understand how forgotten engineering can offer real solutions for our modern world of droughts and scarcity. How did people 3,000 years ago find water we cannot see today? And what caused their ingenious systems to eventually fall silent? What does it truly mean to build a civilization in harmony with a harsh environment, a ribbon of green cuts through a sea of sand, a city of towering columns and bustling markets standing defiant against an endless, sun-baked horizon? This was Palmyra in its prime, a jewel of the Syrian desert where merchants grew wealthy and gardens flourished under a relentless sky. It presents history's great geographical riddle, a paradox written in stone and soil. How could such grandeur, such agricultural plenty, arise in a land that might see only 2 or 3 inches of rain in an entire year? The soil itself seems to reject the very idea of life. This was not a feat of magic, but something far more profound. These ancient builders possessed mastery of their environment. They understood that the true map of their world was not drawn on the surface, but etched into the earth itself. The secret to their survival was not fighting the desert's nature, but learning to read its hidden language. They stopped looking up at the empty sky for salvation, and instead learned to listen to the whispers of the ground beneath their feet. Their solution was an engineering marvel, one that turned the fundamental logic of water on its head. Instead of chasing scarce rainfall, they built a method to summon it from below, creating a reliable, invisible river that flowed where and when they needed it most. This was the birth of a technology so elegant it would sustain empires for centuries, a network of hidden veins known as the Qanat. A Qanat is not a single structure, but an entire ecosystem carved into the earth. To understand its genius, you must first abandon the image of a simple well. A well is a static hole, a place where you go to take. A Qanat is a living artery, a system designed to deliver life across impossible distances. Its birthplace was the highlands of ancient Persia, over 3,000 years ago, where innovative minds solved a problem that still challenges us today. They realized that while the surface was parched, the mountains were secretly hoarding water. Winter snows and rare rains would seep deep into the rocky soil, collecting in vast underground reservoirs called aquifers. The challenge was not finding this water, but coaxing it out and guiding it to where people could actually live and farm. The solution was an act of profound patience and geometry. It began with the mother well, a vertical shaft dug deep into the foothills until its builders struck the hidden water table. This was the source, the heart of the entire system. But instead of stopping there, they began a slow, deliberate march downhill. Workers would dig a second vertical shaft some distance away, then a third, and a fourth, each connected at their base by a gently sloping tunnel. This tunnel, with a gradient so slight you would hardly notice it, It used nothing but the relentless pull of gravity to guide the water from the mother well, through the dark earth, and out to the sun-baked plains below. The vertical shafts you see pockmarking the desert surface were not wells themselves, but lifelines for the builders and maintainers. They provided air, allowed for the removal of excavated earth, and served as permanent access points for cleaning the tunnel of silt and debris. This was a system built for permanence and community. Its construction required immense collective effort, and its maintenance demanded shared responsibility. A Qanat was not owned by a single powerful individual. It was governed by strict, time-honored rules that allocated water fairly among all the families who depended on it. The water itself, sheltered from the desert sun in its underground channel, arrived cool, clean, and without a single drop lost to evaporation. It was a triumph of sustainable engineering, a technology that did not deplete its source, but tapped into it with a gentle, enduring patience. This hidden network did more than just deliver water. It laid the literal groundwork for civilization to take root in the most unlikely of places. From that single Persian innovation, an idea began to flow across the map. The Qanat was too brilliant, too perfectly suited to arid lands to remain a secret. It became a technology of empire and trade, carried not by armies of conquest, but by the footsteps of merchants and the shared need for survival. Its journey followed the greatest network of exchange the ancient world ever knew, the Silk Road. Along those dusty caravan routes, knowledge was a currency as valuable as silk or spice. The blueprint for tapping the earth's hidden water traveled east and west, and in every new home, it was given a new name and adapted to a new landscape. In the far western deserts of China, in a sun-scorched depression called the Basin, it became the. Here, the challenge was even more extreme, with summer temperatures that could feel like an oven and rainfall that was almost a myth. Yet, thanks to the systems, became a lush oasis famous for its vineyards and melons. The builders here faced mountains of gravel and sand, constructing underground channels that stretched for dozens of miles. With mother wells plunging over 300 feet down to reach the life-giving flow from the distant mountains. It was a monumental undertaking that transformed a wasteland into a breadbasket. The technology flowed westward with equal success, reaching the sun-baked mountains and plains of the Arabian Peninsula. In Oman, it took the name, or in its plural form. The Omani mastery of this system is so profound that it shapes the very soul of the culture. For over 2,500 years, they have been the arteries of Omani civilization. What makes them a UNESCO World Heritage Site is not just their engineering, but the intricate social fabric woven around them. The water from a single is divided with breathtaking precision, measured by the shadows of the sun or the flow of a star in the night sky, and allocated to different villages and farms according to a schedule that has been honored for centuries. It is a system governed by community judges and water shares that can be bought, sold, and inherited, a testament to how a technology for survival can become the foundation for law, cooperation, and identity. Further west across North Africa, variations of the Qanat watered Roman outposts and Berber communities, proving its principles were universal. Each culture imprinted its own character on the design, adjusting the slope, the lining of the tunnels, or the rules of distribution, but the core genius remained unchanged. Find the hidden water, let gravity do the work, and protect the gift from the thirsty sun. This was not a story of one invention, but of a single, transformative idea taking root across the globe, proving that the deepest wisdom often lies in working with the world, not against it. While the Qanat was a masterpiece of tapping hidden groundwater, another desert civilization perfected the art of capturing water right on the surface, in a landscape that seemed to offer nothing but solid rock. The builders of the rose-red city of Petra faced a completely different hydrological challenge. Their world was not of soft sand and deep aquifers, but of towering sandstone cliffs and deep, narrow canyons called wadis. In this stone labyrinth, they engineered a hydraulic marvel of a different kind, one that turned a deadly threat into their greatest resource. Their genius lay not in finding a secret ocean, but in mastering the furious, fleeting bursts of water that the desert itself occasionally unleashed. Petra receives barely enough rain to dampen the dust, But when the rare storms do come to the highlands, they arrive with terrifying force. These are not gentle showers, but torrential downpours that send walls of water screaming through the narrow wadis in devastating flash floods. For most, this would be a recurring catastrophe. They saw it as an opportunity. Their entire water system was designed around a single, brilliant principle: capture every single drop, control its fury, and store it for the long, dry months ahead. They transformed their entire city into a giant, sophisticated rainwater harvesting machine. The heart of their system was the breathtaking, narrow gorge that serves as the main entrance to Petra. To a visitor, it is a majestic pathway. To an engineer, it was a carefully managed water conduit. They lined the cliffs with intricate networks of carved channels and ceramic pipelines that intercepted runoff from the plateau above. But their most critical intervention was at the very entrance of where they constructed a massive diversion dam. This dam did not stop the flood, it tamed it. It redirected the destructive force of the water into a man-made tunnel, carved through the rock to bypass the entirely and safely discharge the floodwaters further down the valley. This ensured the city's main artery remained passable and protected their most valuable infrastructure. Once the water was controlled, the work of collection began. Across the entire city and the surrounding cliffs, they carved over 200 cisterns and reservoirs into the solid sandstone. Every courtyard, every temple complex, even the facades of tombs, often hid a carefully engineered catchment system. Channels on rooftops and along streets would funnel the precious runoff into these underground storage chambers, which were then sealed to prevent evaporation and contamination. The scale was staggering, with some cisterns capable of holding over 400,000 gallons of water. This was not a passive system, it was an active, city-wide effort. They even coated the interiors of some cisterns with a special, waterproof plaster to minimize seepage. The result was an artificial oasis of astonishing resilience. In the heart of a hyperarid canyon, they maintained lush gardens, supplied public baths and fountains, and secured a reliable water supply for a population that may have reached 30,000 at its peak. Their expertise proved that survival in the desert was not about one single solution, but about a deep, adaptive understanding of a place's unique rhythm. Where the Persians gently coaxed water from the deep earth, they became masters of the sky's rare, violent gifts, proving that even in a city of stone, life could flourish with enough foresight and engineering ingenuity. The Roman Empire approached the desert with a signature blend of ambition and precision. Where the Qanat was a grassroots, communal answer to scarcity, Rome brought the full weight of its imperial engineering might. In the damp forests of Gaul or the hills of Italy, their iconic stone aqueducts marched across the landscape on towering arches, a breathtaking display of power and control over nature. But in the blistering frontiers of Syria and North Africa, that same confidence had to be rethought. The open-air channels that worked in humid climates were a recipe for disaster under the desert sun, where precious water would vanish into the dry air before it reached its destination. The Roman solution was a brilliant adaptation, a lesson in pragmatic engineering. They began to bury their water channels, creating long, subterranean conduits known as a specus. This was not the gentle, gravity-fed tunnel of a Qanat, but a fortified, meticulously engineered pipeline, often lined with waterproof cement and covered with stone slabs to seal out the heat and sand. It was a testament to the Roman talent for standardization, applying a proven imperial template to an alien environment. We can see this hybrid approach at a place like Dura, a fortress city on the Euphrates frontier. Here, Roman legionaries relied on a complex system that combined deep wells with an aqueduct channeling water from a distant spring, parts of it almost certainly covered to survive the Syrian summer. In the North African provinces, cities like Magna and showcased elaborate public fountains, baths, and latrines, all fed by aqueducts that brought water from mountains dozens of miles away. These were monuments to Roman order, designed to support not just survival, but a specific standard of civilized urban life for soldiers and citizens alike. The philosophical contrast is profound. The Qanat emerged from the landscape and the community, its rules carved from generations of local compromise. The Roman system was imposed upon the landscape by the state, funded by imperial taxes, and built by legionary labor or contracted engineers. One was a sustainable dialogue with a hidden water table, the other a majestic assertion of human will over a visible distance. Both were astonishingly effective, yet they represent two fundamentally different answers to the same existential question. One asks, how can we as a community listen to what the earth is quietly offering? The other declares, how can we make the earth serve the needs of our empire? This divergence in approach would ultimately shape not only how these civilizations flourished, but also how they faced their eventual decline. A Qanat did more than move water, it moved people into a profound social contract. The true genius of this technology was not just in its tunnels, but in the intricate human systems it demanded to function. You cannot simply dig a 20-mile channel through the earth and walk away. Its creation required a unified, long-term commitment from an entire community, and its survival depended on rules so fair and so precise that they became the bedrock of law and identity. This was engineering that built societies from the ground up. The most immediate challenge was labor. Constructing a Qanat was a monumental undertaking, often taking years or even decades to complete. It required teams of specialized workers, who possessed a rare and dangerous expertise. These men descended into the dark, narrow shafts with simple hand tools, digging the horizontal gallery forward bit by bit, always calculating the gentle slope by the light of oil lamps. Always wary of cave-ins or pockets of deadly gas. This was not a job for slaves or conscripts, but for respected professionals whose knowledge was passed from father to son, a living library of geology and geometry. Because the work was so hazardous and essential, they were highly valued, often paid not in coins but in permanent shares of the water their work would bring to life. This created a direct, tangible link between effort and reward, between the individual's risk and the community's future prosperity. Once the water began to flow, an even more complex system took over, one of exquisite fairness. How do you divide a single, continuous stream among hundreds of families whose lives depend on it? The solution was a masterpiece of social engineering, the water share. Instead of claiming ownership of the water itself, which would be chaotic, communities owned shares of time. A farmer's right was not to a certain amount of water, but to have the entire flow directed to his field for a specific, measured interval. This measurement was where ancient ingenuity truly shone. In Persia, they used water clocks, intricate brass bowls with a small hole that would sink in a precise amount of time. In Oman, they used the sun's shadow cast by a central pillar, or even the position of specific stars at night, turning the cosmos itself into a timekeeping device. A village judge, would oversee the distribution, his authority derived from centuries of tradition and communal trust. These shares could be bought, sold, or inherited, becoming the most valuable form of property a family could own, often detailed in wills with more care than land or homes. This system forged a culture of mutual dependence and meticulous honesty. If one person's channel was clogged, it delayed everyone downstream. If someone stole water time, they were not just harming a neighbor, they were breaking the covenant that held the entire oasis together. The regular maintenance, the annual cleaning of silt from the tunnels, was a communal duty, a ritual that reinforced shared responsibility season after season. In this way, the Qanat was far more than a piece of infrastructure. It was a silent, flowing constitution. It taught that a scarce resource must be managed with transparent rules, that long-term survival requires deep cooperation, and that the greatest projects are those that weave people together as tightly as the roots of a desert palm. The water sustained the crops, but it was this invisible framework of trust and law that truly sustained the civilization. The silent, flowing water that emerged from a Qanat's mouth was a miracle born from darkness and meticulous calculation. This was not a task for armies, but for small teams of specialists whose work combined the precision of a surveyor with the courage of a miner. They began with the simplest of questions, a question that had to be answered with absolute certainty before a single stone was turned. Where is the water, and how do we bring it to the surface without a single pump? The answer lay in reading the landscape like a book. The master digger would search for telltale signs of subsurface moisture, like specific types of vegetation or geological formations at the base of a mountain range. Once a promising source was identified, the monumental labor began with the mother well. Teams would dig straight down, sometimes for hundreds of feet, lifting basket after basket of earth and rock to the surface by hand or with a simple windlass. The moment they struck the water table was a moment of profound relief and celebration, for it meant the entire project was viable. Now came the true test of their skill, the excavation of the gently sloping tunnel or gallery that would carry the water to its destination. Working in suffocating darkness and cramped conditions, a digger at the tunnel face would use a short-handled pick to chip away at the earth. Another worker behind him would fill baskets, which were then hauled up through the nearest vertical shaft by a team above. The most critical, constant concern was maintaining the perfect gradient. Too steep and the water would flow too fast, eroding the tunnel walls. Too shallow and the water would stagnate and silt would accumulate, choking the lifeline. Their tools for this were astonishingly simple yet effective. A length of cord, 2 wooden stakes, and a weighted plumb bob became their level. By stretching the cord between stakes and ensuring it was perfectly horizontal using the plumb bob, they could measure the drop over a specific distance, calculating the slope inch by painstaking inch. But how did they ensure that a tunnel digging forward from one shaft met perfectly with a tunnel digging backward from the next shaft, hundreds of feet away in total blackness? This is where their ingenuity truly shines. They used light and smoke as their guides. At night, a worker in one shaft would hang a lantern. A digger in the adjacent shaft, peering into the darkness of his own tunnel, would look for the faintest glimmer of that distant light. By day, they might use reflective metal plates or even burn green leaves to create smoke, watching its drift to check for air currents and alignment. It was a geometry of faith and phenomenal skill. Ventilation was a constant, deadly serious concern. They knew that digging deep into the earth could release pockets of stale air or even toxic gases. The vertical shafts themselves acted as air chimneys, but they also used long cloths or fans to manually circulate air toward the digging face. Their knowledge was empirical, passed down through generations, a catalog of which soils were stable and which might collapse, which rock layers promised water and which were dry. Every foot of progress was a negotiation with an unseen, unpredictable world. This was not a profession one chose lightly. It was a life of dust, darkness, and immense physical danger, where a single misjudgment could mean a cave-in or a fatal plunge. Yet they were pillars of their community, their expertise literally the foundation upon which all life depended. Their work reminds us that the greatest infrastructures of the ancient world were not imposed by abstract power, but were carved by hand, guided by patient wisdom, and paid for in sweat and unwavering courage. This invisible river demanded a perfect balance, a slope so precise it could make or break an entire community. The mathematics of survival within a Qanat were deceptively simple in principle, yet breathtaking in execution. The entire system hinged on a single, non-negotiable number, the gradient. Think of it as the gentle tilt of a dinner plate, just enough for a spilled drop of water to begin a slow, steady journey toward the edge. For the ancient engineers, achieving this tilt across miles of underground darkness was their supreme challenge. Get it wrong, and the consequences were immediate and severe. If the tunnel's slope was too steep, the water would gain dangerous speed. Over years, this flowing torrent would act like liquid sandpaper, scouring and eroding the tunnel walls until they collapsed, burying the lifeline in a tomb of its own making. Conversely, if the slope was too shallow, the water's flow would become lethargic. It would lose its carrying power, allowing fine silt and sediment to settle on the tunnel floor. Slowly, inexorably, the channel would fill up like a clogged artery, choking off the water supply until it stagnated into a muddy, useless trickle. The ideal gradient was a razor-thin margin between these two disasters, often a drop of only 1 or 2 feet for every 1,000 feet of horizontal distance. How did they possibly calculate this without lasers, without levels, without any of the tools we take for granted? Their genius lay in reduction, breaking an impossibly complex problem down into a series of small, manageable steps solved with simple physics and unwavering patience. Their primary tool was a length of cord and a weighted plumb bob. By stretching the cord taut between 2 stakes and using the plumb bob to ensure it was perfectly horizontal, they created a reference line. They could then measure the vertical drop from that cord down to the tunnel floor at set intervals. Doing this over and over, shaft by shaft, they built up a map of the slope, inch by painstaking inch. But this only worked for short distances. The greater puzzle was alignment, ensuring that a tunnel digging forward from one shaft would meet perfectly with a tunnel digging backward from the next, hundreds of feet away through solid earth. Here, they turned to the sky for answers. They used observational astronomy not for navigation, but for underground surveying. By sighting on fixed stars through the vertical shafts at night, they could establish true north and maintain a straight line. During the day, they used mirrors or polished metal plates to reflect sunlight down the shafts, creating a beam to guide the diggers in the gloom. Some accounts suggest they even used water itself as a level, filling long, shallow troughs to find a true horizontal plane from which to measure. This was not theoretical mathematics scribbled on parchment. This was mathematics felt in the hands, seen in a sliver of reflected light, heard in the steady drip of water finding its destined path. It was a science born of relentless trial and error, where a mistake meant months of wasted labor or a community facing thirst. Every successful Qanat that flowed for centuries stands as a monument to this practical, embodied knowledge. It forces us to ask a humbling question. In our world of digital precision, have we lost the intimate, physical understanding of the forces that truly sustain us? Their calculations were not about abstract numbers, but about the very rhythm of life itself, a rhythm they learned to write in water and stone. A Qanat's true test came not with its completion, but with every sunrise that followed. This was a living system, a patient heartbeat that could only continue if the community listened to its rhythm and tended to its needs. The annual cleaning, known as was the most critical ritual of the year, a time when the entire oasis acknowledged its debt to the earth. When the water flow was at its lowest, teams of and local farmers would descend into the vertical shafts, one after another, to begin the great cleansing. Their world became one of flickering lamplight and clinging damp, of the smell of wet earth and ancient stone. The enemy was silt, the fine sediment that the water carried from deep within the aquifer. Over a year, this silt would settle on the tunnel floor, slowly raising its bed and threatening to choke the flow. The cleaners' work was methodical and grueling. They would shovel the soft, wet muck into leather buckets, which were then hauled up to the surface by teams working in shifts, day and night. The removed silt was not waste. It was a gift, rich with minerals and spread over fields as a potent natural fertilizer, closing the ecological loop in a beautiful act of sustainability. But the dangers were ever present. A section of wall, weakened by moisture or the roots of a distant tree, could give way without warning. Repairing a collapse was a delicate operation. Workers would first have to clear the fallen debris, then carefully rebuild the tunnel arch using the same native stone, often supporting the new work with temporary wooden braces until the structure could hold itself. This knowledge of which stones to use and how to shape them was another chapter in this unwritten manual, passed from experienced hands to apprentices in the dim tunnel light. The social dimension of this upkeep was just as vital as the physical labor. Every family that held a water share was responsible for maintaining the section of the Qanat that ran beneath their land. Neglect was not just a personal failing, it was a crime against the community, punishable by fines or even the loss of water rights. This shared duty forged a powerful collective identity, a tangible understanding that the survival of one depended on the vigilance of all. The proof of this covenant's power is written in flowing water that has not ceased for over a millennium. In the city of in eastern Iran, the Qanat still brings life to the desert. Its mother well plunges down more than 1,000 feet, and its tunnels stretch for over 20 miles. For more than 1,000 years, through the rise and fall of empires, through wars and peace, generations of guardians have descended into its depths to clear the silt and mend the walls. It is not a relic behind glass, but a working artery, still irrigating fields and nourishing a modern city. This is the ultimate lesson of the Qanat. It teaches that resilience is not a one-time achievement, but a continuous practice. A society does not build its legacy in a single moment of glory, but in the quiet, repeated acts of care that echo through the centuries. The true monument is not the tunnel itself, but the unbroken promise to maintain it. The desert holds its secrets close, but for those who knew how to look, the land itself was a map written in a subtle, living language. Finding the hidden water that would feed a Qanat was the first and most critical act of faith, a blend of sharp observation, geological intuition, and knowledge passed down through countless seasons. These ancient hydrologists possessed a science of place, a deep literacy of the earth that allowed them to see what was invisible to the untrained eye. Their first clues came from the tenacious life that clung to the barren ground. They learned that certain plants were not just survivors, but signposts. A line of tamarisk trees snaking across a dry valley floor, or a sudden patch of reeds in an otherwise rocky basin, hinted at moisture not far below the surface. The type of vegetation told a story about the depth and quality of the water, with deep-rooted trees suggesting a more permanent aquifer, while shallow grasses might indicate a seasonal, fleeting source. They also read the bones of the land itself, the geology. The confluence of two mountain ranges, or the alluvial fan where gravel and sand washed down from the hills, often acted as a natural funnel, collecting and storing rainwater deep within the porous ground. Even the behavior of animals and insects offered guidance. Swarms of certain flies or ants building their mounds in specific, sheltered locations were noted as possible indicators of higher humidity near the water table. Then there is the practice that straddles the line between folklore and observed phenomenon, often called dowsing or water witching. In this method, a forked stick from a particular tree, like willow or hazel, was held in both hands, and the dowser would walk slowly across the landscape. The belief was that the stick would twitch or pull downward when passing over an underground stream. From a modern perspective, this is often viewed as an unconscious reaction by the dowser to subtle landscape cues they have absorbed, rather than any mystical property of the stick itself. Yet, its persistent use across cultures suggests it was part of a broader toolkit of heightened sensitivity. Whether through botany, geology, or even this intuitive method, the goal was the same: to synthesize 1,000 tiny whispers from the environment into a single, confident point on the map where the mother well should be dug. This was not magic, but a form of slow, accumulated genius. It was the result of generations living in intimate dialogue with a harsh land, learning its moods, its contours, and its hidden generosity. They turned a lifetime of careful watching into a sustainable future, proving that the most advanced technology sometimes begins not with a tool, but with a truly observant eye. The water's journey did not end when it emerged from the mountain's shadow into the desert light. That cool, clear flow pouring from the Qanat's mouth was just the beginning of another intricate system, a network of life that turned a single thread of water into a tapestry of green. From this source point, the community's true work of cultivation began, guided by a second layer of engineering designed for absolute fairness and efficiency. The main channel carrying the water away was often a carefully lined canal called a. These were not simple ditches, but constructed waterways with sluice gates and dividers, the physical manifestation of the community's water-sharing rules. The wood branch, again and again, like the veins of a leaf, delivering the precious resource to different village quarters and farm sectors according to the strict, ancient schedule. But gravity could only take the water so far. What about fields that sat just a few feet above the main channel? For this, the ancients devised elegant, human-scale machines that turned labor into lift. The most common was the shadoof, a timeless tool of balance. Picture a long pole pivoted on a crossbeam like a seesaw, with a counterweight of stone or clay on one end and a bucket on the other. A farmer would pull down the bucket end to dip it into the channel, fill it, and then let the counterweight do the heavy work of lifting it up. With a smooth swing, he could then empty the bucket into a higher ditch. It was a rhythmic, almost meditative process, one person patiently elevating water, bucket by bucket, to nourish a waiting plot. For larger-scale lifting, especially where a river's constant current provided power, they built the noria. These were great wooden water wheels, often towering structures with clay pots or wooden compartments fixed around their rims. The current of the stream would push against paddles on the wheel, causing it to turn endlessly. As each compartment dipped into the water, it filled, and as it rose to the top of its rotation, it tipped its contents into a high aqueduct that fed an entire network of fields. The noria was a beautiful sight and sound, a creaking, groaning monument to harnessing natural energy for communal good. This reliable, constant flow, whether lifted by muscle or current, fundamentally changed what was possible. It allowed for intensive, year-round agriculture unimaginable under rainfall alone. Farmers could plant fruit orchards of dates, peaches, and pomegranates, whose deep roots and long growing seasons required uninterrupted moisture. They could cultivate fields of wheat, barley, and legumes in careful rotation, creating surplus beyond what their own families needed. Most iconic were the walled gardens, that gave us the word paradise. These were private sanctuaries of shade and scent, where rows of cypress trees framed bubbling fountains and beds of roses, made possible only by the precise control of water. This agricultural wealth was the silent, green engine of empire. The surplus food supported not just farmers, but artisans, soldiers, merchants, and rulers. It freed a portion of the population from subsistence toil, allowing for specialization, trade, and the growth of cities. The taxes on this agricultural yield filled royal coffers, funded armies, and built monuments. The date harvest alone could be dried and stored as a perfect food for caravan journeys, fueling the long-distance trade that brought luxury and knowledge to the desert's heart. The true foundation of Palmyra's merchant wealth or Persia's imperial grandeur was not found in a treasure vault, but in the quiet, daily miracle of water reaching a higher field, ensuring a tree bore fruit, and guaranteeing that a civilization could not only survive in the desert, but flourish there with astonishing abundance. The true power of a Qanat was felt not in the fields, but in the quiet coolness of a shaded courtyard at midday. In desert cities, water did not merely serve the architecture. It became the architecture's guiding principle, shaping every street, every home, and the very rhythm of daily life. The city of, rising from the heart of the Iranian desert, stands as the ultimate testament to this philosophy. Here, urban planners did not force a city onto the land. They allowed the hidden map of the Qanats to dictate the city's form. The main underground channels were the city's true foundational lines, and the entire urban fabric was carefully stitched atop them. This was design in profound harmony with an invisible resource. Homes and public buildings were positioned to have direct access to these subterranean streams, not through a simple tap, but through an integrated system of life support. The genius is visible in two iconic features, the private and the towering. In the basement of a traditional home, you would find a stepped, vaulted chamber that descended right down to the Qanat tunnel itself. This was a private, sacred space where the family could access cool, flowing water for drinking and washing, but its purpose went far beyond utility. The constant flow and evaporation in this underground room created a natural refrigerator, a place to store perishable food like dairy and fruit in the blistering heat. Above this cool heart, the home would often be crowned with This tall, chimney-like structure captured the slightest breeze from high above the city, funneled it down a shaft, and directed it over the damp walls of a small indoor pool. The air was cooled by this contact with moisture, and then circulated through the living quarters. It was a perfect, passive air conditioning system, powered by sun, wind, and the Qanat's gift, requiring no energy but the laws of physics. Water also shaped the city's social geography. Where a Qanat channel surfaced at a public outlet known as it created an instant civic center. There was more than a place to fill a jar, it was a hub of conversation and connection. People gathered here to exchange news, to rest in the shade of a nearby tree, and to witness the fair distribution of timeshares by the water judge. The sound of flowing water provided a constant, soothing backdrop to community life. This integration meant that from the moment a person woke to the sound of water in their courtyard, walked through streets aligned to the underground streams, gathered at the public, and returned to a home cooled by the Qanat's breath, their entire existence was cradled by this engineered river. Water was not a commodity they acquired, it was the element in which their civilization lived and moved. It dictated the orientation of walls to maximize shade, the placement of gardens within private courtyards, and the very timing of daily activities to avoid the worst heat. In and cities like it, you see a complete worldview made physical, a demonstration that survival in a harsh climate is not about brute force, but about intelligent, graceful integration. Where every architectural choice whispers a deep understanding of the precious, hidden gift flowing silently beneath your feet, yet even the most resilient systems have a breaking point. The silent flow of a Qanat, which could endure for centuries, was not immune to the slow, creeping pressures of a changing world. Its decline was rarely a single dramatic event, but a gradual fading, a quiet unraveling of the delicate balance between nature, technology, and community. Understanding this collapse is crucial, for it reveals that sustainability is not a permanent state, but a continuous act of adaptation and care. The first and most formidable enemy was a shift in the climate itself. The very aquifers that fed the Qanats were recharged by rainfall and snowmelt over. When prolonged, multi-generational droughts settled over a region, that recharge slowed to a trickle. The water table, the lifeblood of the entire system, would begin a slow, relentless retreat deeper into the earth. The mother well, once a reliable source, could find itself staring into a dry void. Extending a Qanat to chase a sinking water table was a monumental, often impossible task, requiring re-excavating the entire tunnel network at a steeper, deeper angle. For many communities, the engineering and labor required were simply beyond their means. The system that had freed them from the sky's whims became a victim of the Earth's deeper, slower rhythms. But environmental stress alone did not seal their fate. The social fabric that maintained the Qanat was equally vulnerable. These were systems built on stability, on generations of families honoring the same water shares and performing the same seasonal maintenance. When political upheaval struck, when empires fractured or invading armies marched through, that stability shattered. The cooperative agreements, the authority of the water judge, the shared commitment to the annual cleaning, all depended on a functioning, peaceful society. In times of conflict or oppressive rule, communities were dispersed, labor was conscripted, and the intricate knowledge of the could be lost within a single generation. A Qanat neglected for even a few years could silt up beyond repair, its tunnels collapsing from a lack of the very care that defined it. The final, most decisive blow, however, came with the promise of modern convenience. In the 20th century, the arrival of diesel and electric pumps presented a seductive alternative. Why rely on a gentle, gravity-fed tunnel when you could drill a deep borehole and pump water to the surface at will? This technology promised independence from the communal rules and hard labor of the Qanat. But it introduced a devastating tragedy of the commons. While a Qanat tapped an aquifer at a rate roughly equal to its natural recharge, a powerful pump could drain it in a geological instant. A single modern well could lower the water table for an entire region, rendering dozens of ancient Qanats dry and useless. The very symbol of sustainable water management was made obsolete by a technology that prioritized immediate abundance over long-term survival. The empty channels and dust-filled shafts we see today are not just relics of abandonment. They are monuments to a broken covenant, a cautionary tale written in stone and silence. They remind us that no engineering, no matter how brilliant, can outlast the neglect of its social foundations or the reckless exploitation of the resource it was designed to cherish. The story of these ancient waterways does not end in the silent dust of abandoned tunnels. Across the globe, a quiet but powerful revival is, as modern communities facing severe water scarcity are looking to the past for solutions to a pressing future. In the high desert of New Mexico, for instance, researchers and farmers are studying the principles of the Qanat, which they call a horizontal well. Here, where aquifers are dropping and rivers run low, the idea of tapping groundwater with a gentle, gravity-fed system that loses nothing to evaporation is not a historical curiosity. It is a compelling blueprint for resilience. Experimental projects are exploring how these ancient methods can be adapted with modern materials to create sustainable irrigation for vineyards and orchards, proving that a 3,000-year-old idea can speak directly to the challenges of 21st-century drought. This is not about nostalgia, but about recognizing a profound form of intelligence, one that worked in harmony with natural cycles rather than against them. The most profound guardians of this legacy are found in the very land where the Qanat was born. In Iran, a nationwide movement is actively restoring and maintaining these systems, not as museum pieces, but as vital components of modern water management. The city of a living museum of Qanat architecture has become a center for this work. Local experts, often descendants of the, collaborate with engineers and historians to clean centuries-old tunnels, reinforce collapsing shafts, and document the intricate water-sharing laws. These restored Qanats are celebrated as UNESCO World Heritage, but their value is intensely practical. In many communities, they provide a crucial supplementary water source, especially during power outages when electric pumps fall silent. The cool, clean water from a restored Qanat might feed a public garden, supply a traditional bathhouse, or simply offer a community a tangible connection to an identity built on ingenuity and shared responsibility. The annual cleaning ritual, continues, now often aided by machinery for lifting silt, but still driven by that same communal spirit. This bridge between past and present carries an urgent message for our era of climate uncertainty. As we confront depleted aquifers and more frequent droughts, the ancient logic of the Qanat offers a radical alternative to the extractive mindset of the powerful pump. It teaches us to think in terms of gentle harvesting rather than forceful extraction, of community governance over individual ownership, and of designing systems that are inherently sustainable because they are aligned with the slow, recharge rhythms of the earth. The revival of these techniques is a form of hope, a demonstration that some of the most advanced solutions for our future may be waiting for us in the wisdom of the past. It asks us to reconsider what true progress looks like, not as the ability to dominate a landscape, but as the wisdom to listen to it and build a lasting covenant with the hidden sources of life. That enduring covenant between a community and its water source stands in stark contrast to the technologies that largely replaced it. To truly appreciate the Qanat's genius, we must place it side by side with the two pillars of modern water management, the deep well and the large dam. This comparison is not about declaring one superior, but about revealing a fundamental difference in philosophy, a choice between short-term abundance and long-term resilience. The Qanat's advantages begin with its elegant physics. Because its water travels in a sealed, underground tunnel, it loses virtually nothing to evaporation. In a desert climate, an open reservoir or canal can lose over half its water to the sun and dry air. The Qanat delivers every drop it collects. Its second strength is its social design. It is inherently a shared resource, governed by transparent rules that prevent overuse and ensure equitable distribution. This community governance acts as a built-in check against depletion. Finally, and most critically, a properly maintained Qanat taps an aquifer at a rate that matches its natural recharge. It is a gentle sip from a deep cup, not a frantic gulp. Now consider the modern deep well, powered by electric or diesel pumps. Its great promise is independence and immediate volume. A single well can provide vast amounts of water on demand. But this comes with profound drawbacks. First, it is entirely dependent on energy, a vulnerability during power outages or fuel shortages. Second, and far more serious, is the risk of catastrophic aquifer depletion. A powerful pump can extract water hundreds of times faster than the aquifer can naturally refill, leading to a sinking water table. This not only dries up neighboring wells and ancient qanats, but as the water level drops, it can pull in salty, mineral-laden water from surrounding rock, permanently contaminating the source in a process called salinization. What was a life-giving resource becomes a briny, useless pool. The large dam represents the other modern extreme, a monumental assertion of control over a river's entire flow. Dams create massive reservoirs for irrigation, drinking water, and power. Yet their ecological cost is immense. They disrupt entire ecosystems, blocking fish migration, flooding valleys, and altering the natural sediment flow that fertilizes downstream farmlands. Over time, the reservoir itself fills with silt, reducing its capacity and creating a ticking clock on its usefulness. The qanat, the well, and the dam each answer the same question, but from different worlds. The well asks, how can we get the most water right now? The dam asks, how can we store and control a river's entire power? The qanat asked a quieter, more patient question, how can we live within the means the earth provides, generation after generation? This framing shifts our perspective. It reveals that ancient technology was not primitive for its time, but sophisticated for all time. It offers a model of low-impact, long-term resource management that prioritizes harmony with natural cycles over domination of them. In an age of deepening water stress, that quiet, flowing wisdom from beneath the sand may hold the key to not just surviving the future, but sustaining it. This quiet wisdom from the desert has now found a voice on the world stage. In a powerful act of global recognition, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization has inscribed the greatest of these water networks as World Heritage Sites. This is not merely a historical footnote. It is a declaration that these systems represent a masterpiece of human creative genius. The Persian Qanat system across Iran, with its 11 representative examples, and the 5 majestic of Oman now stand alongside the pyramids and the Great Wall as monuments to what humanity can achieve. The criteria for this honor are profound. UNESCO notes that these sites exhibit an important interchange of human values over a span of time and within a cultural area of the world, on developments in architecture, technology, and the planning of landscapes. Think about that for a moment. This recognition is not for a single beautiful building, but for an entire philosophy made manifest in water and earth. It celebrates the exchange of an idea, the qanat, as it traveled from Persia to Arabia to North Africa, adapting to each culture while carrying its core principles of sustainability and fairness. It honors the technology not as a relic, but as a foundational element that shaped cities, dictated social structures, and literally made civilization possible in impossible places. This international designation does something crucial. It shifts our perspective. It moves these networks from the category of local engineering projects into the realm of universal human heritage. They are recognized not just as Iranian or Omani treasures, but as belonging to all of humanity, as exemplars of a sustainable relationship between people and a punishing environment. The preservation efforts this status inspires are vital. Teams of archaeologists, engineers, and local communities now work together to meticulously document, clean, and repair these ancient channels. They are recording the oral histories of the last, safeguarding the intricate water-sharing laws, and ensuring the physical structures do not crumble into silence. This work is a bridge across time, an active choice to keep this legacy flowing, both as water and as knowledge. In a world grappling with water scarcity, this UNESCO recognition sends a clear message. It tells us that the most enduring solutions are often those born from constraint and cooperation, not from abundance and control. These sites are living classrooms, offering timeless lessons in resilience, community, and the quiet, patient art of listening to the earth. But to understand these systems fully, you must look beyond the stone and the geometry. For the people who built and maintained them, water was never just a physical resource. It was a sacred trust, a living force woven into the very fabric of their spiritual world. This intangible heritage, the stories and beliefs that surrounded every spring and tunnel, reveals the deepest reason for their endurance. The practical act of survival was enveloped in a rich cosmology that demanded respect, transforming engineering into a form of reverence. In ancient Persia, the birthplace of the Qanat, the prevailing faith was Zoroastrianism, a tradition that saw the natural world as a sacred creation. Within this worldview, the element of water known as was one of the 7 holy creations of the wise Lord. It was pure, life-giving, and to be protected from pollution at all costs. This was not a vague spiritual idea. It had direct, practical consequences. Defiling a water source was considered a serious sin. This religious mandate provided a powerful, divine sanction for the careful maintenance of Qanats. It meant that keeping the tunnels clean and the water pure was not merely a chore for survival. It was a moral and religious duty, an act of piety that honored the divine order itself. This spiritual framework extended into the realm of folklore and local belief. Across the many cultures that adopted Qanat technology, stories emerged of guardian spirits dwelling within the water and the dark tunnels. In some traditions, these were benevolent beings, protectors of the source who rewarded those who maintained the Qanat with clear, abundant flow. They were often associated with the mother well, the sacred heart of the entire system. To anger such a spirit through neglect or disrespect risked the water turning bitter or vanishing entirely. Other tales spoke of more perilous entities, jinn or other unseen forces that inhabited the depths. These stories served a crucial social function. They instilled a sense of caution and respect for the dangerous work of the. Venturing into the tunnel was not just a technical job, it was an entry into a spiritually charged space. This folklore provided a narrative layer of safety, encouraging meticulous care and proper ritual behavior to ensure the digger's safe return and the system's continued function. Rituals often accompanied key moments in a Qanat's life. The celebration when the mother well first struck water was a communal festival, giving thanks for the divine gift. The annual cleaning might begin with a small ceremony, asking for protection for the workers descending into the earth. Even the sound and feel of the water held meaning. The cool, quiet flow from a Qanat's mouth was often described as having a special, almost musical quality, a whisper from the underworld that was both peaceful and powerful. This blending of utility and spirituality created a powerful cultural feedback loop. The technology worked because it was supported by a belief system that mandated its care, and the belief system was reinforced by the visible, life-sustaining success of the technology. It was a holistic understanding that saw no separation between the physical and the sacred. The water was a gift, the tunnel was a sacred passage, and the community's responsibility was a covenant. This depth of meaning asks us to reconsider our own relationship with vital resources. In a modern world where water often comes from a faceless pipe, have we lost that sense of sacred connection to the sources that sustain us? The ancient guardians of the Qanat understood that to protect something forever, you must first learn to see it as holy. One of these ancient arteries still pulses beneath the sands of eastern Iran. The Qanat, also known as, is not a relic of a forgotten age. It is a living, breathing testament to endurance. Its origins stretch back to a time before Alexander the Great, over 2,500 years ago, and its water has flowed without ceasing ever since. To stand at its mother well is to stand at the edge of an abyss of human determination. The shaft plunges straight down into darkness for more than 300 meters, a depth that rivals the height of the tower. Just the act of digging this initial well by hand, using ropes and baskets to haul up earth and rock, was a feat of staggering ambition. But that was only the beginning. From that profound depth, the builders carved a gently sloping gallery that snakes through the earth for over 30 miles, delivering life to the arid plain below. The challenges they faced were immense. At such depths, the air would have been thin and stale, the risk of collapse ever present. They worked by the flickering light of oil lamps, measuring their minuscule slope with cords and plumb bobs, inching forward through layers of rock and sediment with a patience we can scarcely comprehend today. This was not a project completed in a single lifetime, but a covenant between generations, each one adding another link in this subterranean chain. The miracle of is not just its construction, but its continuous operation. For more than 100 generations, through the rise and fall of the Achaemenid, Parthian, and Sasanian empires, through conquests and revolutions, the people of this region have honored the covenant. They have descended into the same vertical shafts, year after year, century after century, to clear the silt and repair the walls. The annual cleaning is a ritual as old as the Qanat itself, a physical act of remembrance that keeps the past alive in the present. This unbroken practice is the ultimate proof of the social system that sustains such a marvel. The water is still governed by ancient timeshare principles, divided among families according to a schedule inscribed not on paper, but in communal memory and tradition. It irrigates fields of pistachios and saffron, supporting modern livelihoods just as it once supported ancient ones. The Qanat is the central nervous system of the entire region, dictating settlement patterns, shaping local laws, and providing a cool, reliable source of water in an environment of extreme heat. Culturally, it is the soul of the community. Its presence is woven into local poetry, folklore, and identity. The gentle sound of its emerging water is the sound of home, a constant whisper of resilience. Is the perfect microcosm, a single, magnificent example that contains the entire story. In its depth, you see the engineering audacity. In its miles of tunnel, you see the geometric precision. In its of care, you see the social contract. And in its ceaseless flow, you see the sacred bond between a people and their hidden source of life. It stands as a quiet rebuke to the notion that old ways are obsolete, proving instead that some solutions are built for eternity. The cool, steady flow from a Qanat's mouth did more than quench thirst. It created an agricultural revolution in miniature. With water they could finally trust, these desert societies transformed barren basins into some of the most productive and diverse farmlands of the ancient world. Their bounty began with the essentials of life, the staple grains. Fields of wheat and barley, the foundational calories of civilization, could now be cultivated with confidence, their growth cycles perfectly timed to the unceasing underground supply. This reliable harvest freed communities from the fear of famine and created the surplus needed to support cities, but their ambition reached far beyond basic sustenance. They became master horticulturists, cultivating what we would call cash crops, luxury goods that fueled trade and defined their wealth. The date palm was king in this sun-baked economy. Its deep roots thrived on Qanat irrigation, and its fruit was a perfect desert commodity, rich in nutrients, easily dried for storage, and ideal for feeding caravans crossing vast empty spaces. Orchards of pistachios and almonds added valuable protein and flavor, their nuts traded across continents. In carefully managed plots, they grew cotton. Its fibers spun into the fine textiles that clothed elites and were exported along the Silk Road. In certain regions with particularly ample flow, like parts of Persia and Oman, they even achieved the near-miraculous cultivating sugarcane, a crop that demands enormous amounts of water, turning the desert itself into a source of precious sweetness. This agricultural plenty was not a happy accident, but the result of sophisticated land management. These farmers understood that constant irrigation without careful planning carried a hidden danger: salinization. When water evaporates from the soil surface, it leaves behind dissolved salts, which can slowly accumulate until the earth becomes a toxic, white-crusted wasteland where nothing will grow. To prevent this, they practiced intelligent crop rotation. They would alternate thirsty crops like wheat with more salt-tolerant ones like barley, or even leave fields fallow for a season, allowing rainfall, however scant, to help flush salts deeper into the earth. They also built extensive drainage networks alongside their irrigation channels. These ditches carried away excess irrigation water, preventing it from pooling and evaporating at the surface, thus actively removing salts from the root zone of their plants. In some areas, they even practiced a form of leaching, flooding fields periodically to dissolve the salts and wash them down through the soil profile and out via the drains. This was a deep, generational understanding of soil chemistry, a battle fought quietly beneath the green leaves to keep the land fertile for centuries. The result was a vivid, sensory landscape that the surrounding desolation. Imagine walking from the blinding heat of the desert into a walled garden. The air is suddenly cool and humid, filled with the scent of damp earth and blooming roses. The sound of flowing water from a small channel is constant. Your eyes take in rows of cypress trees standing like sentinels, shading beds of medicinal herbs and fragrant flowers. Beyond the garden walls, the view stretches across a patchwork of orchards, their orderly lines of date palms and pomegranates a deep green against the pale earth, interspersed with the gold of ripening grain. This was not mere subsistence, it was plenty engineered from hidden depths. The cotton from these fields clothed merchants, the dates fed armies and travelers, the pistachios and spices filled royal coffers through taxation and trade. The luxury of a sugar treat or a cent, the stability of a full granary, the very wealth that built palaces and funded empires, all of it flowed from that single, gentle gradient in a dark tunnel. The true measure of their engineering success was not in the stone of their monuments, but in the living, flourishing green they painted across the canvas of the desert. The Qanat's genius was not universal magic, but a precise response to a very specific kind of desert. Its success depended on a perfect alignment of climate and geology, a hidden sweet spot where the elements conspired to create a sustainable water source. This technology flourished in regions like the Iranian plateau not by accident, but because the landscape itself whispered the blueprint. The ideal stage was set at the foot of towering mountain ranges. These highlands acted as natural water towers, catching winter snows and rare rains that would never reach the arid plains below. As this moisture seeped deep into the fractured rock over centuries, it filled vast underground reservoirs, the aquifers. But the crucial piece of the puzzle was the geological feature known as an alluvial fan. Imagine a river of gravel, sand, and silt that has washed down from the mountains over, spreading out in a wide, gently sloping fan shape at the valley's mouth. This porous mixture of sediments is nature's perfect storage unit and delivery system. It soaks up the water from the mountains like a giant sponge, holding it in a hidden, saturated layer. The gentle downward slope of the fan then provides the natural gradient that a Qanat's tunnel could follow, allowing gravity to do the work of moving the water for miles with almost no energy. The mother well was always dug into this alluvial fan, tapping directly into this secret, gravity-fed reservoir. The climate provided the recharge, and the geology provided the storage and the path. It was a system built on reading the land's own hidden logic. This precise requirement explains why the Qanat did not become the sole solution everywhere. Consider the vast Arabian desert, particularly the region around Petra. Here, the hydrological reality was fundamentally different. The bedrock was often solid sandstone, not porous alluvial fans. While there were deep aquifers, they were often too far below or not reliably recharged by local rainfall patterns that were even more scant and unpredictable. The mountains here did not create the same kind of extensive, waterlogged gravel fans. Instead, they created sheer cliffs and deep, narrow canyons that funneled any sudden downpour into violent, short-lived torrents. For the opportunity was not in a steady, hidden seep from a sponge-like fan, but in capturing the sky's occasional, furious outbursts before it vanished into the sand. Their answer was not the long, gentle tunnel of the Qanat, but the vast network of cisterns and diversion dams, a technology of immediate capture and storage suited to a landscape of solid rock and flash floods. This contrast is not about one civilization being smarter than another, but about both being brilliant observers. It clarifies that the Qanat was a spectacular adaptation to a specific and widespread desert type, one defined by adjacent highlands and generous alluvial basins. Where that sweet spot existed, empires could build a covenant with an invisible river. Where it did not, survival demanded a different kind of ingenuity, one that mastered the art of the sudden, precious deluge. The same water that nurtured gardens could also become a weapon of war. In the harsh calculus of desert conflict, control over a hidden spring or a sealed tunnel meant the difference between a city's survival and its silent surrender. A Qanat was not merely a source of life, it was a secret strategic asset, its true layout often a closely guarded state secret. An invading army, no matter how vast, could not sustain itself in a barren landscape without securing a reliable water source. This gave defenders a powerful, invisible advantage. During a siege, the inhabitants of a city like Persepolis or an oasis fortress could retreat behind their walls, sustained by the cool, clean flow from their subterranean channels. While the besieging force languished under the sun, dependent on dwindling supplies carried from distant rivers or unreliable local wells. There are accounts suggesting that during Alexander the Great's relentless campaigns across the Persian Empire, his armies faced this very challenge. Confronting cities fortified by such hidden water networks, his generals had to become hydrologists as much as warriors. Searching for and either capturing or deliberately destroying the mother wells miles from the city walls to cut off the flow at its source. The defensive use of these systems could be even more cunning. Historical sources hint that some cities engineered their Qanats with hidden, secondary outlets inside the walls, allowing defenders to access water even if the primary mouth was captured. More darkly, there are tales of defenders, facing certain defeat, performing the ultimate act of denial. They would collapse key sections of their own qanats, burying the life-giving tunnels in rubble to ensure the conquering army could not simply turn their own water against them, or use it to sustain an occupation. This transformed a technology of life into one of sacrificial defense, ensuring that if they could not hold their home, no one could enjoy its fruits. Similarly, the vast cisterns of Petra or Byzantine desert monasteries were not just storage, they were siege reserves, designed to hold enough water to last months or even years of isolation. This strategic dimension reveals the darker, more pragmatic side of ancient water management. It was not only a science of cultivation, but also a science of power and survival. The invisible network beneath the sand became a hidden battlefield, where knowing the location of a single shaft could decide the fate of an empire. This understanding forces us to see these peaceful channels in a new light, as the silent, flowing foundation upon which military might and political control were irrevocably built. The carried a library in his mind, a map of the aquifer written not on parchment, but in memory and muscle. For 3,000 years, this was how the knowledge survived, passed from master to apprentice in the echoing darkness of the tunnel, one whispered instruction and one shared task at a time. This was not a formal education found in books. It was a living science, transmitted through stories of past cave-ins, through the feel of different soils in the hands, through the subtle sounds water makes as it flows over stone. A master could tell by the dampness on a wall or the type of root piercing the ceiling exactly how deep they were and what layer of earth they were traversing. He knew which slopes worked in which valleys, how to repair a collapse with the local stone, and the precise rituals to follow when first tapping a new source. This was hyperlocal genius, a deep catalog of solutions for a specific place, earned through generations of trial and error and held in trust for the future. The tragedy of our modern age is not just the silent tunnels, but the fading voices of those who knew how to listen to them. With the arrival of pumps and pipelines, the long, difficult apprenticeship of the lost its economic purpose. Young people moved to cities for new kinds of work, and the chain of oral transmission, stretching back to antiquity, began to break. When the last keeper of a specific qanat's secrets passes, an entire chapter of human adaptation is erased. It is a loss of intangible heritage as profound as the collapse of a tunnel. The precise geometry for that valley, the folk remedies for stabilizing that particular type of sandy soil, the stories of the guardian spirit of that spring, all of it vanishes into silence. This forces a difficult reflection. In our global rush towards standardized, high-tech solutions, what other forms of deeply sustainable, place-based wisdom have we inadvertently discarded? What ancient understandings of local plants, whether patterns or soil management, have been lost because they were never written down, only carried in the hearts and hands of a community? The erosion of this knowledge represents a different kind of drought, one of memory and context. Preserving the physical structure of a qanat is only half the battle. The other half is preserving the living culture that maintained it, the songs sung during the cleaning, the proverbs about water sharing, the very language used to describe the hidden world beneath the sand. This is not a call to abandon progress, but a plea for discernment. It asks us to look at the old ways not as primitive steps on a ladder, but as parallel paths of intelligence, offering a different kind of answer to the eternal question of how to live well within the limits of a place. The silent qanat is a monument to engineering, but the fading story of its keeper is a monument to a way of knowing, one that understood sustainability not as a technical specification, but as a sacred dialogue between people, their history, and the hidden heart of the land they called home. The desert keeps its secrets well, but modern archaeology has learned to listen through the sand. Unearthing these vast, fragile networks presents a unique challenge, as traditional excavation would risk destroying the very structures researchers hope to understand. Today, the quest to map the ancient water highways employs a blend of space-age technology and timeless human insight. From the sky, drones equipped with high-resolution cameras and thermal sensors sweep over barren landscapes, capturing subtle variations in vegetation and soil moisture that betray the hidden path of a tunnel far below. These aerial surveys create a detailed map of surface clues, revealing straight lines of sinkholes where vertical shafts have collapsed, tracing the ghostly outline of a Qanat's course across miles of empty desert. For a view beneath the surface, scientists turn to ground-penetrating radar. This device sends pulses of energy into the earth and listens for the echoes, building a three-dimensional picture of subsurface disturbances. It can often distinguish between solid bedrock and the hollow, backfilled signature of an ancient tunnel, allowing archaeologists to pinpoint where to investigate without ever lifting a shovel. The most thrilling moment comes during a cautious, targeted excavation, when brushes clear away centuries of dust to reveal the precise stonework lining a vertical shaft. Or when a camera lowered into a dark opening sends back images of a perfectly arched gallery, untouched for 1,000 years. But technology only tells part of the story. The search always begins in libraries and with local elders. Scholars pore over medieval Persian irrigation manuals, Ottoman tax records that detail water shares, and the travelogues of geographers from centuries past. These texts offer names, locations, and descriptions of systems long since vanished from living memory. Then, archaeologists walk the land with community members, listening to oral histories about a place called the Old Spring, or a local legend of a cave that once had flowing water. An elder's recollection of where his grandfather helped with the annual cleaning can be the key that connects a line on a drone map to a living cultural memory. Each discovery is a piece of a grand puzzle, slowly restoring the forgotten hydrology of an entire region. Finding a single forgotten shaft is not just about cataloging a ruin. It is about understanding how a long-lost village positioned itself in the landscape, where its fields likely were, and how it connected to a larger communal web of survival. Every mapped tunnel extends the story, proving that what we once saw as isolated oases were in fact interconnected nodes on a vast, subterranean grid. This detective work is ongoing, a collaboration across disciplines that is rewriting the historical map of arid lands. It reveals that the legacy of these ancient engineers is not fully lost. It is simply waiting, layer by layer, to be read again from the earth itself. These ancient networks whisper a set of engineering truths that feel startlingly modern. Their brilliance lies not in complex machinery, but in a profound respect for natural forces, a philosophy that offers a timeless blueprint for building in harmony with our world. The first principle is the elegant use of gravity. The entire Qanat system is a monument to working with this fundamental force, not fighting it. There are no pumps, no external energy inputs, just a carefully calculated slope that allows water to move itself across vast distances with silent, perpetual motion. This passive design is the ultimate in energy efficiency, a lesson in letting nature do the work wherever possible. The second insight is the use of local materials and appropriate technology. They did not import exotic stones or metals. They built with the earth they excavated, lining tunnels with native rock, sealing cisterns with locally sourced lime plaster. Their tools were simple, their methods born from generations of understanding the specific soils and geology of their home. This created systems that were not only sustainable to build, but were inherently repairable by the community using the materials at hand, ensuring resilience long after the original engineers were gone. Third, and perhaps most crucial for our era, is the design for minimal environmental impact. By placing the water underground, they eliminated the catastrophic evaporation losses that plague modern reservoirs in arid climates. They tapped aquifers at a rate that matched natural recharge, avoiding the depletion we see with powerful extraction wells. Their entire approach was one of gentle harvesting rather than forceful domination, a model of taking only what the earth could continuously provide. Finally, they mastered the principle of maintenance and redundancy. The Qanat was never a build-it-and-forget-it project. The regular vertical shafts provided constant access for cleaning and repair, making upkeep a built-in feature, not an afterthought. The social systems of shared water rights ensured that responsibility was distributed, so the failure of one person did not mean the failure of the entire system. This combination of accessible design and communal governance created infrastructure that could last for. Today, as engineers confront crumbling concrete, energy-intensive desalination plants, and aquifers, these four principles resonate with new urgency. They ask us to reconsider what truly makes a system advanced. Is it the complexity of its parts or the elegance of its relationship to the natural world? The silent, flowing wisdom beneath the sand suggests that the most sustainable future may be built on foundations we have known for thousands of years. The steady flow from a Qanat did more than feed crops, it nourished the human spirit. Once survival was assured, this precious resource began to rise from the hidden tunnels into the very heart of cultural expression, transforming from a tool of agriculture into a medium for art, philosophy, and the pursuit of paradise on earth. The most profound evolution of this idea was the Persian walled garden. This word, which gives us our term paradise, was not a vague metaphor. It was a physical, carefully engineered reality, a direct expression of what the mastery of water could achieve. Within high walls that shut out the harsh desert, a microcosm of ideal nature was constructed. Straight, shaded pathways were lined with cypress and fruit trees, intersecting at right angles where a central pavilion overlooked a reflective pool. Channels of water, precisely calibrated from the Qanat supply, flowed through this space, feeding fountains and cooling the air. Every element was symbolic, the four channels representing the rivers of the sacred world, the trees and flowers signifying fertility and eternal life. This was not mere landscaping, it was theology made tangible, a claim that through harmony with water, a perfect, ordered world could be created even in the most unforgiving environment. The garden became the ultimate symbol of imperial power and divine favor, a private heaven for royalty that demonstrated their command over the fundamental forces of nature. This artistic relationship with water extended from private sanctuaries into public life. In the courtyards of homes and in the central squares of cities, the sound and sight of flowing water became essential to daily well-being. A simple fountain in a dusty plaza was not just a place to drink, it was an oasis for the senses. The gentle, continuous murmur of water provided a constant, soothing counterpoint to the dry, silent heat. Its presence lowered the ambient temperature through evaporation, creating pockets of cool, humid air where people could gather, converse, and rest. Visually, the play of light on moving water, the sparkle of droplets in the sun, introduced a dynamic, living beauty into an otherwise static and monochrome landscape of earth and stone. This was psychology as much as hydraulics. The experience offered profound relief, a sensory reminder of life, abundance, and tranquility in a world defined by scarcity and hardship. In grander settings, like the palaces of Islamic Spain at the Alhambra, this principle was elevated to an architectural symphony. Water was choreographed. It traveled from hidden aqueducts into narrow, lining walkways, spilled into serene, reflecting pools that doubled the beauty of arched colonnades, and trickled down ornate channeled stairways called stairs of water. Here, the liquid itself became a structural and decorative element, its sound, movement, and reflective quality fully integrated into the design to create an atmosphere of serene, contemplative coolness. The journey of water, then, was a journey from necessity to transcendence. It began as a hidden secret in the earth, was harnessed by community labor for survival, generated the agricultural wealth that built empires, and finally ascended to become the central ingredient in humanity's highest artistic and spiritual aspirations. The functional channel that watered a date palm was the same source that fed the fountain in a paradise garden. This seamless blend reveals a holistic worldview where utility and beauty were not separate pursuits, but different facets of the same profound respect for a life-giving element. The desert civilizations understood that to truly master water, you had to honor it in every form, from the dark, silent flow of the tunnel to the joyful, public splash in the sun. They left us a legacy that asks a quiet but powerful question. In our modern quest for efficiency, have we forgotten how to listen to the music that water makes, and the peace it can bring to a parched world that cool? Reliable flow from beneath the sand was the original currency of empire. It created a form of wealth more tangible than gold, a surplus of food and goods that could be taxed, traded, and transformed into monumental power. The economic logic was simple yet profound. A farmer nourished by Qanat water could grow more than his family needed. That extra wheat, those surplus dates, became commodities. They could be sold in local markets, but more importantly, they could be loaded onto the backs of camels and sent along the vast, interlocking web of caravan routes like the Silk Road and the Incense Trail. The desert, once a barrier, became a bridge, and the oasis cities that controlled the water became the wealthy toll gates of global trade. Consider the of Petra. Their mastery of flash floods and cisterns did more than keep their city alive. It positioned them as the indispensable middlemen of the ancient world's most lucrative business, the trade in frankincense and myrrh. These rare aromatic resins, harvested from trees in southern Arabia, were worth their weight in gold in the temples and palaces of Egypt, Greece, and Rome. The caravan route north was a deadly gauntlet of bandits and thirst, except for one place, Petra. They did not just sell water to the passing merchants, they offered security, warehousing, and a bustling market. They taxed every bale of incense that passed through their canyons, using that wealth to carve their breathtaking facades directly into the cliffs. A display of power funded entirely by their control of the desert's most precious resource, hydration for men and beasts. In the Persian Empire, the economic engine was even more vast and systematic. Here, the Qanat networks created an agricultural powerhouse. Vast, irrigated plains produced immense surpluses of grain, cotton, sugar, and fruit. The state levied taxes on this bounty, filling the royal coffers. This agricultural wealth funded a standing professional army that could defend the empire's long borders. It paid for the construction of magnificent cities like, with its legendary arching vault, one of the largest single-span arches of the ancient world. It supported a sophisticated court of scholars, artists, and bureaucrats. They understood this connection intimately. They had a government ministry dedicated solely to the construction and maintenance of qanats and bridges, treating water infrastructure as the primary source of national revenue. The taxes collected from the fertile lands watered by these hidden channels were the literal fuel for imperial ambition, turning the gentle flow from a mountain aquifer into the might of cavalry and the splendor of palaces. This transformation from water to wealth to power reveals the subterranean network as the true, invisible economic engine. Every golden coin in a merchant's purse, every stone in a fortress wall, every silken robe in a royal court could be traced back to that original, quiet miracle of water arriving in a sun-baked field. The empire's visible grandeur was merely the flowering of a root system that ran deep and dark beneath the earth. It was a system where life, commerce, and majesty all flowed from the same hidden source, proving that the greatest fortunes are not found in mines, but in the patience to listen to the whisper of water moving through stone. This hidden water shaped the daily lives of half the population in ways rarely recorded in stone. While the who dug the tunnels and the judges who allocated timeshares were almost always men, the moment that water reached the community, its primary guardians became women. Their relationship with the resource was intimate, constant, and fundamental to the civilization's daily function. From the cool darkness of the household to the bustling public, water access dictated the rhythm of a woman's day and carved out her social world. Her first task was collection. Even with a Qanat channel running near the home, someone had to fetch the day's water, carrying heavy clay jars or goatskins, often over significant distances. This was not a mere chore. It was a critical, time-consuming responsibility that required strength and planning. The journey to the water source, however, became something more. The public outlet where the Qanat surfaced was a space of vital social exchange. Here, women from different families would gather, waiting their turn according to the schedule. In the shade of a tree, with the sound of flowing water as a backdrop, they exchanged news, arranged marriages, shared remedies for illness, and forged the informal networks of care and information that held the community together outside of official structures. This was a woman's domain, a rare and sanctioned space for conversation and connection outside the home, making the water point a cornerstone of social cohesion. Once the water was home, her management began. Every drop had a purpose and waste was unthinkable. She was the master of its hierarchy of use. The cleanest water, often drawn from a private household access, was for drinking and cooking. Water used for washing vegetables or hands would be saved for watering a small courtyard herb garden or a fruit tree. Bathing water might eventually find its way to moisten the soil for a date palm. This meticulous recycling was a science of conservation passed from mother to daughter, a daily practice of sustainability that ensured the household thrived within its means. Beyond domestic needs, water was the lifeblood of crafts that often fell to women. The processing of wool and cotton into thread, the dyeing of fabrics with plant-based colors, the making of pottery from local clay, all required careful control of water at different stages. The quality of the water, its temperature, and its availability directly influenced the success of these essential economic activities. The social dimension of this labor is profound. The shared experience of drawing water, the collective knowledge of its management, and the economic contribution of water-dependent crafts gave women a form of authority and expertise that was essential, yet often invisible in the official records of engineers and kings. Their daily negotiation with this precious resource was a quiet, powerful form of stewardship. It reminds us that the story of ancient water is not only one of grand engineering and imperial decrees, but also of countless unspoken routines, of hands that carried the jars, of eyes that judged the clarity of the stored supply, and of the conversations that flowed as steadily as the hidden spring, weaving the human fabric that made the desert truly livable. The same relentless sun that baked the desert empires now beats down on a planet growing warmer and drier. We face a challenge they would recognize all too well, a world where reliable water is becoming a memory in more and more places. Our modern crisis of climate change, with its deepening droughts and overstressed aquifers, echoes the fundamental struggle these ancient engineers were built to solve. This is not a distant history lesson, it is a conversation across. The Qanat and its sister technologies were not just clever inventions, they were humanity's first sophisticated toolkit for climate adaptation, a blueprint for surviving and thriving in a world. They succeeded without a single watt of electricity or a drop of fossil fuel, using only observation, gravity, and community wisdom. This makes their legacy not a relic, but a vital library of ideas for a sustainable future. Their core strategy was radical acceptance. They did not try to change the desert's nature, to make it rain more or to wish away the heat. Instead, they meticulously studied the rhythms they were given, the hidden aquifers, the rare flash floods, the behavior of plants. They built their entire civilization around working within those limits, not against them. This principle of adaptation, rather than domination, is perhaps the most critical lesson they offer us today. Our modern approach has often been the opposite, relying on massive energy inputs to force environments to conform to our demands, pumping aquifers dry and diverting rivers across continents. The ancient model suggests a different path, one of subtle integration. Think of the Qanat's most elegant feature, its subterranean channel. By moving water underground, they solved the problem of evaporation, which can claim over half of a reservoir's water in a desert climate. Today, as shrink the Great Lakes and reservoirs of the American West, the loss of billions of gallons to the sun and air is a catastrophic inefficiency. The ancient method presents a quiet alternative, a way to think about water storage and transport that prioritizes preservation over mere volume. Furthermore, their social systems enforced sustainability. The water shares and communal maintenance were not just about fairness, they were a built-in check against overuse. No single individual could drain the aquifer for personal gain, because the technology itself and the laws governing it were designed for collective, long-term benefit. In an era of private wells and powerful pumps, where the tragedy of the commons plays out in sinking water tables from California to India, this model of community-based resource governance feels urgently relevant. It teaches that the technical solution is only half the answer. The other half is the social contract that protects it. What we call climate adaptation today, they simply called living. Their technology was a form of renewable energy harnessed from the slope of the land and the pull of gravity. Their policies were designed for resilience across generations, not just for abundance in one. As we look for ways to cool our cities, we might study the passive cooling of the basement, which used water and airflow instead of air conditioners. As we seek to recharge depleted groundwater, we can look to their methods of directing surface runoff into infiltration basins, mimicking the natural recharge of an alluvial fan. Their entire philosophy was one of working with the landscape as a partner, not a resource to be mined. This history transforms these silent tunnels from archaeological curiosities into a source of profound hope. They are proof that human societies can not only endure harsh climatic realities, but can craft cultures of astonishing beauty and complexity within them. The challenge is not whether we can invent new technologies, though we must, but whether we can recover the ancient wisdom of listening to the land and building our lives within the generous, yet firm, boundaries it provides. The silent desert holds more than ruins. it holds the answer to their own demise. The romantic tales of lost cities, swallowed by sand and time, often miss the most fundamental truth. These were not places that simply vanished, they were places where the water stopped. Their decline was rarely a sudden cataclysm, but a slow, relentless unraveling, a silent emergency where the most critical piece of their world, the hidden water network, fell into disrepair or was severed entirely. Take the magnificent city of Petra. For centuries, its wealth was secured by the genius for capturing flash floods. But what happens when the very mountains that channel the water begin to change? Historians note that a shift in trade routes was only part of the story. A series of powerful earthquakes, common in the region, likely struck a devastating blow to the city's fragile hydrological heart. These tremors could have collapsed the intricate cliffside channels, shattered the underground cisterns, or even altered the course of the wadis themselves, diverting the precious violent rains away from the city's catchment systems. Without the engineering to capture and store water, the gardens would have withered, the public baths fallen silent, and the population faced an impossible choice. The city's grandeur did not fade because people forgot its beauty, but because they could no longer guarantee a drink of water for every citizen. A similar story of hydraulic failure whispers from the vast emptiness of the Sahara. Across what is now Libya and Algeria, satellite imagery reveals the ghostly outlines of ancient settlements, once thriving oases sustained by an astonishing network of underground tunnels similar to Qanats. Known as, these systems tapped fossil water, ancient aquifers filled during a wetter climatic era thousands of years before. For a time, it worked brilliantly, supporting towns and agriculture in the hyperarid desert. But fossil water is not a renewable resource, it is a geological inheritance, a one-time gift. Through no fault of their own, were drawing from a bank account with no deposits. As the water table inexorably dropped, maintaining them became a desperate, losing battle. Extending the tunnels deeper required Herculean effort, and eventually, the cost in labor and resources outweighed the diminishing returns. The water simply retreated beyond reach, and the settlements, tethered entirely to that vanishing source, were gradually abandoned. The sand did not attack these cities, it merely flowed in to fill the void left when the life within them dried up. This reframes the greatest historical mysteries not as magical disappearances, but as profound logistical failures. A civilization can survive war, political collapse, even economic disaster, but it cannot survive without water. The abandonment of a city is often the final, visible act in a long, unseen process, the slow-motion catastrophe of a broken covenant with the source of life itself. When we look at a crumbling facade in the desert, we are not looking at a monument to forgotten gods, but to a failed pump, a collapsed tunnel, or a spring that finally went dry. We can now walk through an ancient water tunnel without getting our feet wet. This is the power of digital archaeology, where lasers in the sky and code on a screen are opening windows into subterranean worlds that have been sealed for centuries. Researchers are no longer limited to the dangerous, physical excavation of a single shaft. Instead, they use Geographic Information Systems, or GIS, to layer maps of ancient settlements over satellite data of soil moisture and vegetation. This reveals hidden patterns, showing how a line of greener plants or a subtle depression in the earth perfectly traces the path of a forgotten Qanat for miles across a barren plain. The real magic happens when this data is brought to life in 3 dimensions. Using photogrammetry, where hundreds of overlapping photographs from drones are stitched together by software, archaeologists can build a precise digital twin of a canyon wall in Petra. complete with every carved channel and water stain. They can then simulate a virtual flash flood, watching how the water would have been captured and redirected by the engineers. For a Qanat, specialists use simulation software to model the entire hidden network. They input the slope, the tunnel dimensions, and the estimated water source, and the program calculates the flow rate. This answers questions that physical fragments cannot. How much water did this system deliver per day to the oasis? Would a collapse in one section cause a backup that flooded another? By digitally rebuilding the construction sequence, they can test theories about how they aligned their tunnels, experimenting with different surveying methods to see which one results in the precise, gentle gradient found in the real world. These virtual models also reveal the system's impact on the wider landscape. A digital watershed simulation can show how tapping an aquifer at a specific point in the mountains would have lowered the water table in distant valleys, possibly explaining why some settlements were abandoned when new qanats were built upstream. It transforms isolated archaeological sites into interconnected parts of a living, breathing hydrological organism. This technology offers more than data. It offers a visceral form of time travel. Wearing a virtual reality headset, a researcher or student can stand in a digitally reconstructed courtyard in ancient, hear the sound of a virtual fountain, and look down to see a transparent cutaway of the Qanat flowing beneath their feet, its cool water feeding the garden around them. It allows us to appreciate the scale and sophistication of these networks in a way a dusty diagram never could, letting us see the desert not as a blank expanse, but as a landscape sculpted by invisible rivers of human ingenuity. This digital resurrection does more than preserve the past. It provides a dynamic new toolkit for solving the ancient riddles of survival, one pixel at a time. The true legacy of the Qanat is not measured in miles of tunnel, but in a fundamental question of relationship. This ancient technology was built upon a philosophy, a way of seeing the world that stands in quiet contrast to the logic that powers much of our modern infrastructure. At its core, the Qanat system embodied a principle of careful tapping. It did not seek to conquer the aquifer or command it to yield more than it could give. Instead, it engaged in a patient dialogue with the water table, accepting its natural recharge rate as an unbreakable limit. The engineers understood they were not creating a resource, but respectfully accessing one that moved to a slower, geological rhythm. This required a profound humility, a willingness to design a civilization around the Earth's pace, not humanity's ambition. The water was not owned, it was held in trust. The intricate shares and communal laws transformed a physical resource into a social covenant, ensuring that its benefits and its burdens were distributed fairly across the entire community. Generation after generation. This was stewardship in its most practical and profound form, a daily practice that recognized survival as a collective, long-term project. It framed water not as a commodity to be extracted and sold, but as the sacred bloodstream of the community itself, a gift to be protected with meticulous care. Our contemporary approach often reflects a different mindset, one of dominion and extraction. We drill deeper and pump faster, seeking immediate abundance with powerful technology that can drain an aquifer in decades, a blink of an eye compared to the it took to form. We build vast, centralized systems that can feel impersonal and distant, where water becomes a utility bill, its origin and journey a mystery. This is not a judgment on progress, but an invitation to reflection. What philosophy is embedded in our pipes and reservoirs? Do they encourage conservation and shared responsibility, or do they enable isolation and unchecked use? The silent, flowing wisdom of the Qanat elevates the conversation from pure engineering to the realm of ethics. It asks us to consider the values we build into our world. Is our goal to dominate nature and maximize short-term gain, or to find a lasting harmony within its generous, yet firm, boundaries? The answer, whispered from beneath the sand, suggests that the most resilient futures are built not on the promise of infinite taking, but on the wisdom of gentle, shared receiving. The promise of these ancient waterways is not confined to history books. In a world of deepening drought and sinking aquifers, the principles of the Qanat offer a surprisingly practical blueprint for a more resilient future. The question is no longer whether these systems were brilliant, but whether their quiet logic can be revived at a scale that matters today. The answer lies not in a wholesale return to the past, but in a thoughtful, hybrid approach that marries ancient wisdom with modern understanding. The challenges to widespread revival are significant and cannot be ignored. Modern land ownership laws present a major hurdle. A Qanat is a linear system that must travel in a straight, gentle slope beneath many properties. Securing the legal right-of-way across dozens or hundreds of private parcels in today's world is a labyrinthine task far more complex than the communal agreements of old. The initial labor cost is another formidable barrier. While the maintenance of an existing Qanat is manageable, the initial excavation of miles of tunnel by hand is prohibitively expensive compared to drilling a borehole and installing a pump. Perhaps the greatest obstacle is the changed state of the aquifers themselves. In many regions where Qanats once flowed, centuries of intensive pumping have lowered the water table far beyond the reach of the original mother wells. Chasing that sinking resource with a new Qanat would often be an exercise in futility. Yet, these are not reasons to dismiss the idea, but parameters for intelligent adaptation. The most promising path forward is not to see Qanats as replacements for modern water systems, but as supplements to them. Imagine a hybrid model for a water-stressed city. The municipal supply, drawn from deep wells and distant rivers, is reserved for essential drinking and sanitation. Meanwhile, a restored or newly constructed Qanat system, tapping a shallower, sustainable aquifer, could be dedicated entirely to non-potable uses. Its cool, clean flow could irrigate urban parks, street trees, and community gardens, transforming concrete landscapes into cooling green corridors without placing additional strain on the primary drinking water supply. In agricultural regions, such a system could provide a reliable, evaporation-free water source for drought-tolerant crops, reducing farmers' total dependence on energy-intensive pumps and helping to stabilize the local water table. This is not a fantasy. Pilot projects are already exploring this very concept. In arid regions from New Mexico to Oman, engineers and communities are working together to rehabilitate ancient channels, sometimes using modern drilling techniques to access the water source, but then letting gravity and the protected tunnel do the rest of the work. These projects are proving that the Qanat's core virtue, its ability to deliver water without loss to the sun, is its most valuable modern asset. The social models are being adapted too, with water shares managed by local cooperatives or municipal authorities, ensuring fair distribution in a contemporary legal framework. The ultimate lesson here is one of diversification. Just as a wise investor does not put all their capital in one stock, a resilient society should not rely on a single, vulnerable source for its water. The Qanat represents a different kind of asset in our hydrological portfolio, one that is passive, sustainable, and community-oriented. It will not solve every water crisis, but it offers a proven tool for specific, critical tasks, easing the burden on our overtaxed modern systems. This forward-looking vision is grounded in pragmatic hope. It acknowledges the realities of our world while recognizing that some of the most elegant solutions for living within our means have been with us all along, waiting patiently in the dark, ready to flow once more. From the depths of the Persian plateau to the stone cisterns of Petra, the story of these empires is written in water, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of relentless scarcity. These were not mere feats of engineering, but the very pulse of civilization, a hidden rhythm that dictated where cities rose, how communities governed themselves, and what dreams of paradise they could cultivate. The silent tunnels and vast reservoirs were more than infrastructure. They were the physical manifestation of a covenant, a promise between a people and their environment to live within the generous, yet firm limits of a harsh land. They understood something we are relearning in our era of climate uncertainty, that true resilience is not about domination, but about dialogue. It is about listening to the landscape, understanding its hidden language of aquifers and alluvial fans, and designing a society that moves in rhythm with those ancient, slow cycles. The Qanat, these names from forgotten tongues carry a message for our parched present. They teach that sustainability is not a modern invention, but an ancient practice. It is found in the gentle slope of a tunnel that lets gravity do the work, in the transparent water shares that prevent overuse, and in the annual ritual of cleaning that honors the source. It is a philosophy that sees water not as a commodity to be extracted, but as a sacred trust to be maintained across generations. Our modern world, with its powerful pumps and vast dams, has achieved miracles of abundance, yet it often operates on a logic of extraction and short-term gain. The whispering wisdom from beneath the sand offers a complementary path, one of conservation, community, and deep-time thinking. It asks us to consider not just how to get more water, but how to cherish every drop, protect it from the sun, and share it with a fairness that outlasts any single lifetime. As we confront depleted aquifers and deepening droughts, these ancient blueprints for survival become more than history, they become a source of hope. They prove that humanity can craft cultures of astonishing beauty and complexity within the most challenging environments, not by fighting nature's rules, but by mastering them with patience and collective care. The hidden rivers of the past remind us that the most profound solutions are often elegant, passive, and built on a foundation of mutual responsibility. They flowed then, and their lessons can flow again, if we choose to listen. If this journey into the ingenuity of the past has resonated with you, consider subscribing for more explorations of history's forgotten wonders. We would love to hear which ancient technology fascinates you most, so please share your thoughts in the comments below.